Midnight TCG members. This is Midnight Fox. We're coming to you with this week's Competitive Edge podcast. Tonight I'm joined by Genzaki, who is recording. We have Genzo.
Hello.
And we have Eddie Phoenix, of course. Say hi, Eddie. Hi, Eddie. Anyways, if you guys noticed, we have kind of switched things up. But it's kind of been getting a little slow, so we're kind of moving to a bi-weekly schedule, try to stretch things out a little bit more for you guys and give you a little bit better info when we do come together and do our podcast. So I just want to mention that when we're starting out as to why you're not seeing our podcasts go up every week. This week, I'm just going to talk about a couple items. We're each going to give our thoughts tonight on what we think the current state of the meta is and why. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Judgment of the Light and maybe a few cards we think might impact in some way the meta. So, without further ado, I kind of mentioned we're going to start out with the current state of the meta. For me, I would honestly say, I don't want to say that it's a horrible meta because for your competitive players, it is a very competitive meta, but it's 3 decks and one that's just 90% of it. So you are seeing a lot more thinking behind the plays in games because you're running into so many mirror matches with Dragon Rulers. But for the younger players and such, other than the people who play in the Dragon Duels, I think it's kind of driving them off to the side. I've seen a little more slowing at my local levels. And I haven't seen as much, although Genzo is on there a lot more. I haven't seen as much activity as usual on Dueling Network because a lot of what you run into now is either Dragon Rulers, Prophecy, or Evil Swarm. And that's the majority of it. But we know September's just around the corner, so next month things could change up and the game's going to, in my opinion, pick back up because, I mean, with the last YCS that we talked about, 26 of the first 28 that we had info on were all Dragon Rulers. Konami's definitely going to have to cut something on that deck, whether it be Dragossack or the Adult Dragons or something. So I think it might change things up a little bit. Plus, we've got some newer sets coming out, which, like I mentioned, we're going to be talking about a little bit about Judgment of the Light. So that may make some changes too, make a couple more decks more competitive. But I think it's kind of slowed down, and more of what you're seeing now is your seasoned veterans or your guys who are just there for the pure competitiveness, who are frequenting all the time, even at least in my area, their local levels, and the guys even in Indianapolis, which is about 60 miles away from me. A lot of it is mostly your competitive players because this is their meta. I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to say this meta completely sucks. It's good if you're a competitive player, but if you're a casual player, it kind of makes you want to sit back. It's to me, it's worse than Teledad. But that's just my thoughts on the current state of the meta. What about you, Genzo?
I really don't care about the current state of the meta. The only thing that really interests me about it right now, because we are, less than a month away from the format change, is Worlds. I'm pretty stoked. I disagree with most people in regards to Worlds, where a lot of people say it doesn't really matter. It always matters. It's the only tournament, in my opinion, that really matters. It's the one event yearly that decides who's the best player. Whether you agree with the results or not, I don't care about that. But so it's that time of year for me. I always enjoy seeing the deck list, now Konami from last year has made it evident that they are willing to do a little extra work for that tournament, and they put up a live stream over the 2 days and showed the matches, including the matches that a lot of the Americans were interested to see, because we got to see Winston play. So that, I'm not really concerned. I think that month before format changes, I lose total interest, because the game is getting ready to change. And if I'm not mistaken, they said there's a YCS. They go over 2 days, right? And I want to say the 2 days are the last day of this format and the first day of the next format. So I don't know how that's going to work out. But I mean, I guess that's,
It's kind of weird for it to run into that situation too. From
it is very weird.
To the next.
Yeah, I imagine it's just going to be this format for both days, because it's going to have started in this format. But I think that's weird. But yeah, so for me, like I mentioned pre-podcast, the fewer decks that are in a meta or in any given meta, when there's fewer decks to account for that are going to actually be able to compete, it's better for the skilled player, because they can focus not just their deck but also their side deck for very specific matchups, and it's not such a die roll on what you're going to be paired up against. You can kind of, almost quote unquote guarantee what you should see. So but again, like I said before, it is the last month of the meta, so I'm not really concerned about the meta at this point. Just kind of looking forward to Worlds and then seeing what happens on the ban list, because I've seen a lot of guys putting a lot of stock in a ban list that they have zero clues about it at this point, and kind of like making proclamations about how certain decks are going to be good, and I just want to see how that pans out.
I am, like I said, I'm kind of interested. Konami doesn't like to hit newer things, especially knowing they have the dragons coming out in tins. I look more at them to hit Dragossack over the dragons themselves. But
I don't see him hitting Dragossack at all.
Ooh, that's the problem card in the deck.
It's not the problem card at all. It's the dragons. It's the product, or it's the end result of the problem.
Yeah,
the problem are the big dragons, and I could see a lot of people have been mentioning already, talking about ban list and kind of what their thoughts on, and a lot of the points I agree with. Putting Big Eye to 1 makes the Big Eye become a right play. It becomes a right decision. You can no longer just put Big Eye on the field, because now you only have 1, and that would make a big difference. But also the semi-limiting of the dragons would help. I just don't think Dragos. I mean, if you take Dragossack down to 1, that kind of hurts Mecha Phantom Plane Beast things. I don't think that's relevant at all. But I'm just saying, it's a powerful card. Don't get me wrong, but it's the deck that's playing in it that makes it seem.
I think they at least need to semi-limit the dragons.
That'd be a good start.
What about you, Eddie?
Well, my thing is, I'm going to touch on something just real quick and then get to my thoughts on the meta or whatever. But I've seen talks about the potential of Royal Oppression coming back, which, if we're going to be... I know.
I would love it, but I don't see it happening.
You never know. And then, there's things like, well, let's bring back plants into the picture, so we'll just limit glow-up bulb and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of talk of what's going around of, maybe helping certain other decks get back up to speed with this current meta, to where it becomes a more, I would say pre-Dragon Rulers release. But, anyway, with the current meta as it is now, it's like if you're not playing one of 3 decks, you're kind of on the outside looking in for not only the competitive but the casual side of things. And when you're kind of sort of shutting everybody out with having it be a 3 deck meta, it kind of sort of deteriorates the actual want to surf sites, find deck builds, things like that, because it's just like, oh, all I have to do is remember that I need these cards and then win games. So
we all agree
that's me.
Okay, it's a little bit sucky. It could be better. We're not all hating on it, saying this is the most horrible format ever. Thankfully, the Dragons hit, about midway through format, so we've seen about 2-3 months of play out of them. So,
I think even after a month, Konami would probably cut the Dragons at the knees.
they've got to do something, because, I mean, when you look at a event and 26 of 28, as far as we had, and I think it ended up being, 28 out of 32 were Dragon Rollers. When you look at that much of it being one deck, you got to cut something at the knees in it. Something that takes away some of the steam from it. But enough of that. We could probably sit here and talk for hours on that subject. Looking more towards the future, we are the competitive edge. With Judgment of the Light hitting, just kind of some cards of interest. I know Genzo and Eddie probably going to look more at the competitive side of some of the new releases. Me, I'm a archetype kind of guy. So the things I'm most interested in seeing that came out Judgment of the Light is the new Archfiend support. Going back to the old school like they did with Harpies in the last set and gave us the stuff that made Harpies competitive. I'm not sure that it's going to make the Trick Archfiend, Archfiend Cavalry, and Evil Emperor of Terror Genesis Archfiend are going to make Archfiends a high-tiered deck, but it definitely does give it more options. It's not so much centered around the dice rolls. Now, that archetype within itself will have 2 searchers, one from the deck, one that special summons from the grave, and it'll have its own sort of, and that's in the Trick Archfiend. It searches another Archfiend when it's destroyed by battle, and you add it to your hand. Archfiend Cavalry, if it's destroyed by a card effect sent to the graveyard, you can target an Archfiend in your graveyard, except Archfiend Cavalry, and special summon it, but it can't attack. But Evil Emperor of Terror Genesis Archfiend, you can normal summon him without tributing, but he gets halved. You can get around that with skill drain. If you do during the end phase, you destroy it. I mean, that's the bad part of that. But it kind of gives you a little bit of chaos in it, in the fact you can't remove something from your opponent's side of the field, but you can banish one of your Archfiends so they're not dead in the graveyard to destroy something. So maybe a baby Dark Armed Dragon in Archfiend form. So for me, I think that's what I was most excited to see out of it. But then again, like I said, I'm more of a casual player. Do I like some of the competitive scene? Yes. But I like more to look at than going back, giving tribute to the older cards that defined the game when I first got into it. So to see some new Archfiend guys come out that can lend some support to that deck within itself, it is kind of nice. Archfiends is actually the second deck I started playing when I got into the game, and I just liked it because of the chest feel of the cards themselves. So, for me, Judgment of the Light, I think this will at least give Archfiend people a reason to look at them again, so they're not just sitting and collecting dust. It does open up a couple options if you did used to enjoy the deck of trying it out again. That's my personal opinion. So with that, I'll let Genzo go on with his thoughts.
Well, I want to talk about the Archfiends myself a little, just a second, because I think I need to pay Mr. McThrasher a little bit of due, because he did a lot of developing with this deck and had a big hand in the information that's in our deck discussion in the archetype discussion section. I think there's a lot of quality Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is that I think that this bit of Arcfiend support actually makes the deck a deck for the first time, because while you could have ran an Arcfiend deck before, I think we all know those cards and how kind of terrible they are. But yeah, so like these Arcfiends give the deck an actual first face, if you will, in my opinion at least. An Emperor, like that guy is pretty good, and you mentioned that his having to just normal summon him effect, but he destroys himself. That's actually not a bad thing, because the resource building that the deck does in the opening game, a lot of it can stem from his effect to destroy himself when you have Pandemonium on the field, because he pops himself, you lose the body, but you gain a search for an Arcfiend card. And then again, like you mentioned, the banishing of the Arcfiend cards, because it's not just your monsters. If you have Arcfiend's Roar, the kind of Call of the Haunted for the archetype, you can banish it as well to activate his destruction effect. So he's really good. The Cavalry's a decent card as well. I don't think we have the one card, the level 6 yet, but I think that the Arcfiend Hyrus is what they named Trick now. He's probably like the best card in the deck, maybe, because he makes Tour Guide relevant, because he's a Tour Guide target. And on top of that, he searches all your Arcfiend cards. So I think it'll be just like Harpies, but I won't be fooled twice again, because I really got into the Harpies, and I still do like the deck. It's just one of those casual decks, like spend a lot of time developing that thing to find out that there's just very few dynamic plays that it has to have to compete against the top decks. And I think that'll be the same case for Arcfiend. It's a really fun deck. It's got nice moves. It's fun to play, but it'll just be weak against the meta.
And to some of you people out there, before we go off of the Arcfiends, make sure that you take a look through some of the information on the web. There are cards that are considered Arcfiends that are not titled Archfiends, such as Summon Skull,
Red Dragon Archfiend,
Axe of Despair.
So, just a little something to mention to you guys. Don't just take it at face value that it has to say Archfiend. There are a few cards out there, too, that you could splash into this deck that are not titled Arcfiend.
Okay. With the close of the Arcfiends, we'll just talk about, I think, and I think this is kind of a common thread right now, like, the biggest archetype in the JOTL pack would be the Bujin, because Bujin Yamato is a pretty good card. Just his ability to search and thin your deck out, and not just for like random cards that sit in your hand, but cards that are once in your hand can either become fodder from the graveyard or your hand. So I think we'll just start it there. Eddie, what are some of your thoughts on these cards that are coming out?
For me, I'm seeing like Light Beast, and I'm seeing a few Light Wing Beast monsters. I know that Bujin Yamato is going to be definitely fodder for the Fire Formation Tenki.
Indeed.
And for some reason, my brain's trying to come up with this hybrid of Black Wings and Bujin, because I'm seeing the two wing beast monsters. No, this can't work because they're beast types. Stop that. So, if I'm gonna because I'm looking at Yamato first, and it's like, okay, during the end phase, I can add one Bujin monster from deck to the hand, and send one card from the hand to the graveyard, and I can only control one of the Yamato. Well, I believe there's one in here that when you discard it, you discard it to the graveyard. I believe it comes to your side of the field. Because let me look at this. Hang on. Okay, no, it doesn't. So, excuse me for that one. But being able to use Yamato to be able to ditch a card to your graveyard, and then be able to use Bujin Qualence effect, because I don't know if it has to be on your turn or it can be on your opponent's turn, because it says you can only use the effect of it once per turn, because you can banish him from the graveyard. Just like target one face-up card your opponent controls and destroy that card.
I'm not sure about if there's any rulings on that card, but I'm seeing that it's an ignition effect, and my initial thought would be you would only be able to use that on your turn. But you know, it could definitely, it could very well easily be used on your opponent's turn if it's one of those BKKS things.
Yeah.
Or it's just something I don't know.
Yeah, and now I know Turtle, because I'm reading it, it's going to be your effect failure for the deck. Because it's during the player's turn, whenever a face-up Buja monster you control is targeted by a card it's targeted by a card effect. Excuse me, wrong thing to say here. It's going to be something along the lines of, like, your wind-up Zenmaines. Not the effect failure, because you can discard it and negate the effect. Or banish it from your graveyard to negate the effect.
Yeah, so like that's kind of like the thing about the deck. It's, I mean, if you can tell just from reading Yamato's last effect, you can only control one Bujin Yamato. It tells you some very key things about the deck and how it's going to want to be played. It's an obvious tempo control deck. It's going to want to play the resource game, which is kind of like one of the big things in the air right now about the ban list. You know, would the ban list slow the game down enough for Bujin to actually compete, because it is a slower deck, and that's what it does. You know. Yamato's effect digs out stuff like Turtle, which is a really great card for the deck, because you can stop cards from targeting a Bujin monster, which is generally going to be your Yamato. You know, Yamato. It's like, I think I heard, like, well, you can even say it yourself. It's like, if you don't get Yamato in the first 2-3 turns, you lose the game, I guess, because he's so key to the deck.
Well, I mean, you're also going to be looking at, like, you're going to be wanting to get your hands on Bujin Crane as well, because. So, okay, whenever the Bujin Beast Warrior, or when a Bujin Beast Warrior type monster you control battles, you can send this card from your hands to your graveyard. The original attack of your battling monster is doubled during damage calculation only. Now, granted, these are just the starting Bujin. When the Shadow Spectre pack comes out, you'll be seeing more Bujin support.
Yeah.
So.
But I do think that for this deck, whether the ban list lets it thrive or not, it is a decent little deck, you know, and like I said before, it's probably the most talked about archetype that's being released in this. And since we did talk about it a little bit, you know, I did want to mention that it's a slower resource kind of deck. It wants to control tempo and try to get key cards like, say, Yamato on the field with something like a Vanity's Emptiness, you know, to try and control the game. But with that, I think it's a good point now to go ahead and switch it to another archetype that's going to not be released in this deck, but be kind of have its face changed in the deck. Which is the Fire Fist, and the 3-axis and the 4-axis. They got a little support in this pack with Rooster.
Okay, let me grab him real quick. But go ahead and explain Rooster for those at home.
Alright, well, he's a level 3, and that tells you that this is the 3-axis. That's what that means. It's kind of just like the levels. And I only want to touch base really on the 3-axis because I think it's probably the better of the two, personally. So he's a Fire Beast Warrior, level 3, 1500 attacker, with an effect that says, when this card is special summoned by the effect of a Fire Fist monster, you can add one Fire Fist monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use the effect of Rooster once per turn, and then once per turn you can send one face-up Fire Formation spell or trap card you control to the graveyard, and then you can set one Fire Formation spell or trap directly from your deck. It's a nice little engine room there.
A little bit. One of the things I caught up towards the as I was scrolling through, find it real quick. I know it's a Fire Formation. Crud. Go on.
Are we good?
You're good.
Okay, yeah. So, like I was saying, yeah, I remember the name of the card, and I'm sorry, guys, that I'm not a little more prepared with names right on the tip of my tongue. But it's Fire King Avatar Garunix, or High Avatar Garunix. But Garunix is the key name, and basically that's what Yaksha is for. It's a facilitator for him because, you know, his effect to Raigeki the field only happens if he's destroyed, and Yaksha kind of gives you another way to do that. Whether he's in your hand or field or whatever.
Wait, there's one card in this pack, other than the archetypes and everything that's coming out, that I really want to kind of sort of touch on and discuss, because I don't know if he's going to be one of those big cards that changes the meta a little bit, or if he's one of those things that may get splashed in.
What's that?
It's Star Eater. He's the light dragon, synchro effect monster, level 11, 3200 attack, 2800 defense, requires 1 tuner and then 1 or more non-tuner monsters. Must be synchro summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. Its synchro summon cannot be negated. When it's special summoned, cards and effects cannot be activated. If this card attacks, it is unaffected by other card effects until the end of the damage step. Why does it sound like Obelisk the Tormentor for me?
Because it has a lot of that initial summoning protection, the same as Obelisk has. I've touched on this card, I think, in an earlier one, when the name that we had at the time was Celestial Dragon, and I like the card. In my very first, I want to say I had 2 different builds for Dragon Ruler when we first were, had the cards on Duel Network and Death Probe to kind of play around and start developing the deck. And I had him in the extra deck when I was running Delta Flyer, because Delta Flyer increase its level or one of your level 7 Dragon Rulers by 1, and there's a 2-card Star Eater, as he's called now. It was just, it was almost win more, because as we know, the Dragon Ruler deck probably doesn't need him. It probably wants the level 8 synchro much more. And so I'm not sure if the extra deck has room, but saying, for instance, the ban list puts Big Eye to 1, you have an extra spot there. But anyway, yeah, I think it's a neat card, and I think it'll be another option for synchro heavy decks. Whether or not quick draw or junk decks are still relevant, people will still play them because they're niche decks that people gravitate towards and kind of just stick with for long periods of time. So we could see him play in a deck like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, we know those decks have the ability to hit level, or synchro levels from 2 to 12. So, it's very possible to see him there. Whether or not he affects the meta like you were asking, I would say no initially. I mean, even if he does see, extra deck play for, say, a Dragon Ruler deck, do we really think, or will we really believe that because the Dragon Ruler deck had him in the extra deck, it made a difference? I don't think so.
No, I just figured, just to throw the idea out there, just to, get people's ears and thoughts going on it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I definitely dig that, because, like I said, I don't think there's a lot of, or much more archetype support to talk about, but there are some really key cards. One of which, speaking of synchros, that I wanted to mention and see you guys' thoughts on was Miss Bird Clausolis, I think is his name. He's the new level 3. He's not the first level 3, he's the second level 3 synchro we have, but it's the first one that's generic and decks can actually make it.
Okay,
have you guys... he takes 1 tuner, 1 or more non-tuners. Once per turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Its attack becomes 0, and if it does, its effects are negated. These changes last until the end of this turn. What do you think?
Fox.
Decent.
Oh,
I never got into the lower levels because I like going 3 and above. I mean, if in a Piper Chaos deck, if I was running it in something like that, I might find a way to use it. But I center myself usually 3 to 6. I don't like to go below 3 because I don't want dead things in my hand. I mean, I know Effect Veller's a card. Before Genzo says that one, Effect Veller is a card. But I don't...
No, the one I was going to say would be Formula Synchron's a card, and it's below the level 3. So the little guys in the synchro world really can make an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this guy can, because what would be a big problem for a synchro deck maybe, just looking at a common Ixies monster being Dragosack. His ability to stay on the field until you get rid of the tokens can be a problem, via destruction anyway. So you can make your Miss Bird Clausolis, I hate that name, you can make him, because what is Formula Synchron? It's nothing more but a connector play. a facilitator for something bigger. Like, you don't just make a Formula Synchron play 98% of the time. 98% of the time, you don't just sit on a Formula Synchron play. You don't go Formula Synchron, draw a card, I'm done. You know, it's a stepping stone. It's a connector play to something bigger. And this guy could be the same thing. You could hit your level 3 synchro, activate effect, negate Drago Sack's effect by dropping his attack to 0, which is really good as well. And then just continue with your turn, build up your synchros, and then punch.
There was one other interesting card in here, and it's only because I like the Photon Archetype, especially with Satellite, that I just want to give a mention to, and that's Radiant Light Emperor Galaxion.
Oh, yeah.
2 level 4 monsters. You can detach 2 Exceeds Material monsters, and then you can either special summon a Galaxy Ice Photon Dragon from your hand, or special summon one from your deck. So, I mean, for the Photon players, the people who like the Galaxy Ice Photon Dragon, it's definitely a guy to put out there. It's an easy summon with a Photon Thrasher and Photon Crusher.
You know
2 cards
something,
summoned in 1 turn, you got him out.
Sorry, but Fox, you brought up Dragon, and I'm looking at another card right now. It's Googly Eyes Drum Dragon. It's an Earth Machine XYZ effect. XYZ effect, excuse me. Rank 8, 3,000 attack, 2,500 defense. It requires 2 level 8 machine-type monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 XYZ material from this card. This card gains 1,000 attack until your opponent's next end phase. If this card is destroyed while it has an Exceed material, you can banish 1 super defense robot monster from your graveyard. Special summon this card from your graveyard. Then you can attach 1 super defense robot monster from your graveyard to this card as an Exceed material.
I think we're looking at the same card, except I was looking at the OCG version, Garbage Eyes Fat Dragon. Same card.
Yeah.
Well, the idea is I think if you do the limiter removal, I don't know if its effect would be stopped by limiter removal, or if it would still meet the effect from limiter removal to jack this thing attack up to like 8,000 and swing for an OTK kind of thing. I don't know.
I mean, you could, but the effect you just read out was kind of, I don't know.
It's gonna cost a lot, and I mean, with today's meta being so fast, taking your time setting up a combo is really hard. I mean, spellbooks and dragon rulers are so quick that it doesn't give you time to work out those longer plays that are great combos. I mean, I'm sure all 3 of us go on DN and we have some great combos, but the game has gotten so quick that you don't have time to build up that hand. Unless you get an opening hand with that combo, then you just did it all for moot.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I'd say, yeah, it'd be a decent, okay card. Maybe if we get the format to slow down a little bit. But right now, with it being so fast-paced, you don't have time to get those combos into hand unless you pull them in your opening hand.
Well, there probably are ways to do it. Just like it's one of those kind of risk versus reward, like, or maybe effort to pay off. Like, are you paid off enough to make the effort you have to put into it worth it? But anyway, I just have 2 more cards. One being Masked Chameleon and one being Master Key Beetle. So, what do you guys' thoughts on those 2 cards? I mean, I think Master Key Beetle is probably one of the bigger cards from the set, if not probably the biggest. This guy with Vanity's Emptiness is a pretty nasty thing.
I just had it up, too.
So he takes 2 level 4 dark monsters. Once per turn, you can detach 1 Ixies material from this card and target 1 card you control, except this card. While this card is face up on the field, that card or cards cannot be destroyed by card effects. If this face-up card on the field would be destroyed, you can send 1 of its targets to the graveyard instead. 2,500 attacker, dark, So you could also use it for eradication of epidemic virus or deck Devi if you were in that situation. Evil Swarms is probably the most generic deck to think of that would run this card.
I think it's definitely a decent card to look at if you're running a dark deck, considering it only costs 2 level 4s. And with it being an insect, I could see Eddie's favorite deck making some kind of use out of it. And I know you mentioned that, but Insectors, with him being an insect, I could see it being a thing in there.
They could definitely make it.
Yeah, considering you could send an Insector to the graveyard and then use an effect to bring it back and run through a loop again, definitely, I think Insectors could definitely make use of this other than just Evil Swarm. Because
I want to say, like, generically, like, the kind of Insector decks that I've seen bubbling around here and there they all have the standard Dragonfly and Ladybug. So, like, you equip Ladybug, increase Dragonfly's level to 1 when you send it to the grave, special summon Centipede, do the same overlay. You have Master Key Beetle. But they're also running Summoner Monk, so you can go Summoner Monk into Summoner Monk or Summoner Monk into Armageddon Knight, get a little bit of extra value, and then make the card, you know. But it's just going to be the card for the decks that can produce it. It's going to be like the protection for their cards that would generally be very easy for decks to get rid of, like a Vanity's Emptiness. You activate Vanity's Emptiness and have another set spell or trap. Your opponent MSTs the other spell and trap and then sends them both to the graveyard. So it's a 2-for-1 deal. Key Beetle would stop that. It allows your power stun kind of cards to be much more difficult to be addressed by your opponent. I think it's a pretty good card in my opinion.
Well, and with our graveyards and our banished areas being just as important to the game as the deck in your hand, I mean, it's really not even as hurtful anymore to send something on your field to the graveyard to keep this 2,500 beater out. The only thing that he's going to run into is a low defense. So an enemy controller or Book of Moon can make short work of him if your opponent can get to him. But he definitely, I think, has some plays.
And that's something else to be said, because you mentioned, it is kind of like easy to get back past this guy if he's kind of left alone or just left being defended by your one kind of stun card. So I guess kind of like a key point to note that this guy's probably going to be in decks like an Evil Swarm deck that wants to make one kind of monster and then set 3 to 4 traps to kind of protect that one monster, which is generally Ophion. But you know what I mean? It's going to be for decks like that that can protect him.
I'm still looking back at card I mentioned a few podcasts back, and I've been fiddling with it in a few more decks, and I think it's been pretty effective. And it still flies under the radar in a lot of decks, and that's number 69, Heraldry Crest. Deck is more powerful than anybody gives it credit for. It's Shockmaster on steroids.
Well, I don't think it's anything like Shockmaster. It's an alternate choice, right? Because he only affects one card, yeah.
Yeah, you get to choose one type, but the thing that Heraldry Crest has been useful for me is when my opponent floods their field with Xyz monsters and I take away all their effects the turn he's summoned. I mean, Konami, they put those little gems into these sets that nobody really looks at, and I think, tonight we've covered quite a few that some players probably have overlooked and thought, forget that card. There are a few gems, if you really start to look through your lists, that you can find that not a whole lot of players are going to use, so when you pop that out of your deck, depending on what you're running, it's easy to catch people off guard. Heraldry Crest has saved me quite a few times since I started fiddling with it. I've found myself now more, I had One-Eyed Skill Gainer. I still run Shockmaster, but I replaced Skill Gainer with Heraldry Crest because, honestly, it's better. I can still steal an effect, and he also gets the ability when he hits the field to negate all other siege monsters. Decent card, overlooked. And there's quite a few in Judgment of the Light that I think are going to be overlooked. That as the game progresses, people go back and look at these cards. I mean, that's like Super Rejuvenation in Dragon Rulers. Super Rejuvenation had never really been a huge card in too many decks, but now it's like the essential draw engine for Dragon Rulers. It's an easy way to reload your hand, and it's such an old card. Somebody eventually thought of it, but it had been a card nobody would have ever thought of using. So definitely always take a look through spoilers, because you could find little gems that nobody's even thought of that could be the difference in a mirror match on whether you win or lose. That's just the Fox's quotes of wisdom.
It's like, okay, well, the last guy I just wanted to mention, because it will see some kind of play, just because I can vouch for the buzz that it's been getting, especially from just personally some friends of mine who are Noble Knight players. Noble Knight Dristan is a nice pickup for that deck. You know, it offers them the ability of spot removal with this effect. You know, when he's equipped with Noble Arms equipped spell card, you can target one face-up card on the field, destroy that target. And of course, he's level 4 light. You know, warrior goes along with the whole Noble Knight archetype.
The sad thing is that deck had a short buzz, but it does have its plays.
And it's getting more. I mean, to be correct about it, it's getting more, because it seems like in the last 2 sets, maybe, they've given them a little bit more. You know, like I remember before this guy Dristan and the last bit of support, which was the new equip, Angwal Shavid, I think maybe. Like people were trying to justify the level 5 guy just because the deck lacked options, and so like, you know, with the new bit of support, they no longer have to run those inconsistent variations of the deck. They can kind of like focus in on rank 4 and the qualities and good characteristics of the cards. And this guy is an important piece to me. I just think the ability to destroy face-up cards, and not just a monster, but if it's a face-up spell, trap, monster, or whatever, they can get it off the field. So I think it's a pretty quality piece of card for the deck.
That's the important thing in the game that has been lost in translation, so to speak, is you mentioned it's been getting support little by little. I think that's been the problem and the slowdown in the meta, other than the competitive players, is getting decks like Dragon Rulers, and you get everything in one set. Of course, you're going to slow down the meta. Everyone's going to run it because it's a stupid deck. Like I said, I've said it a few podcasts. First time I ever touched it, I misplayed 5 times and still won. It's just that stupid. If they space out these cards like Noble Knights, you know, and definitely, let's go back and look at Heroes and how long people said they were absolutely horrible. And when they first released, and for about a year or so, they were horrible. But they eventually...
It was longer than that.
Yeah, it was quite a bit. But they started getting more support, and it made them playable. And I think that's the problem that really Konami has to address to keep the interest, instead of losing players when they release something like Dragon Rulers altogether, is to remember not to release a big powerhouse deck all in one set. Spread it out over 3 or 4 sets so that people have to work on building different versions until they get everything they need. So, I mean, to me, that's really the problem with the meta. It's not the meta itself. I mean, Konami really wanted to probably address giving everyone a competitive chance. Granted, your extra deck is really what's going to kill you in the game, but anybody could basically build dragon rulers cheap. But to make it most effective, you have to have that extra dag. So, but they released it all at once. I think if they would start doing what they've done with like Noble Knights, and now they're starting to come back to some of the old archetypes like Harpies and Arc Fiends, what they really need to do is just space it out a little better, and you're not going to have a specific dead meadow or 3 months of the meta where nobody wants to play because all you see is this, this, and this. Spread it out a little bit more and we're all happy. I mean, even if they'd have split it into 2 sets, it would have softened the blow of Dragon Rulers hitting. Any other thoughts, guys?
Nope.
That's it.
So, I guess in closing, like I said, we are switching up to bi-weekly on the podcasts, so tune in every 2 weeks. Definitely go into the Competitive Edge podcast area, wherever you see the podcast up. If you want to hear about something, mention it in there. We like to listen to the people who listen to us. We try to cater to the people on the forums, so put your thoughts in there. A lot of people have probably noticed if you put a suggestion in the suggestion box, a lot of that comes through. A lot of what we build this site on is based on what you, the members, want. So feel free always to voice your opinion. I'm willing to give anything a chance. And it's been kind of slow on the Flash tournaments. It is still going on. So tune in Thursdays or Fridays. If I don't get enough people on Thursdays, you may see me pop it up on a Friday and say, hey, we're going to have a Flash tournament tonight. Since we're going for the iPhone case, for the people who were turned away from the themes, we're going to finish out this set without a theme. It's just going to be a regular tournament, single elimination. But when you see that the mat's coming up again, look forward to your themes again. But definitely check out all the board. We've shrunk it down a little, but everything that you enjoy is still there. I mean, we still have the gaming section, the Magic section, the Yu-Gi-Oh section, of course, and the entertainment section. So, and last thing we want to mention is to be prepared. It's August now. It's probably about the middle of the month. You guys will start seeing emails come out. Starting in September, we're going to start working on our Duel for a Cure campaign again. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so we'll be switching up to our Anastasia skin, and we'll be trying to raise funds for the Relay for Life. So definitely tell your friends, get them onto the board. Make sure that when you tell them to sign up, they take a look at that little box that says user validation and post I'm a human in it, and we'll get you into the system. We try to do everything we can to keep our site bot free. That's the only reason that's there, is to give you all a pleasurable viewing experience instead of a bunch of ads from bots. So, with that said, this is Midnight Fox and Ginzo and Eddie, and this is the end of the Competitive Edge podcast, and Eddie's going to dance us out.
Oh,